You're now watching two old farts making noises. Welcome to Canadian Art Today with your host, Paul Constable.
Oh, I got it almost. I'm going to figure this out yet. So, Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a great summer day. We're having a heat wave, but it's beautiful. I love the sun. It's gorgeous.
And the fires no longer, or we thought on
In
Canadian
our
fires?
sector, there still are, but they're not as bad as down east.
Okay.
Montreal's choking, and so is Toronto, and I think all the way down to New York. They're all feeling that devastating fires in the north there of Quebec.
Yeah, that's the
We
shame.
still have fires in Alberta. They're still burning. It's really, really dry. We've had a few. Problem is, you have a rain, but then you have a lightning storm that goes with it.
And then you get more. Then you get more fires, and there you go.
Yeah, get more fires, and
Well,
it's things we have to deal with on a daily
yeah,
basis. Sort of
it
like
could be
looking.
worse.
I don't know. I guess so. We could be.
You could be here in Texas where it's going to be 41 Celsius today. So those people that have to do math on their fingers and toes, it's 111 Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
So,
it's hotter. Yeah, it's. We've had some warm weather as well, and I'm good. Just leave it in the 30s. We're fine. 40s,
I'm
I
good
don't
with
want
that.
to see that.
And
40s,
30s for those, once again, 30s for those people that have to figure that out is 90 Fahrenheit. So, we have to
yeah.
help the Americans because they don't know metric or, Celsius. It's very, very, very bad.
Stick your head out
So,
the door, and you can see you want to go right back into the air.
I was just going to say, go put your head out the door. You just know it's hot. So
It's hot.
it's very cool. So today we have a special guest. I'm very excited.
Yes, we're. Artists work in a number of different formats. They paint on paper, they paint on canvases, they do all those kind of things. And now we've got an artist that makes her own paper, and this is quite. It's not necessarily easy to do, but it is manageable even in a small space once you learn how to do it. And you can recycle a lot of your papers that you use, and use those back into your work thing. So run them through your grinder of any kind that you've got, or your paper. You end up cutting it, and you can put it through your what do you call it? Your automated. I don't know what you call it. I forget.
Your automatic paper thing. Sure.
Yeah, that
Technical
automated
term.
paper thing that grinds up stuff. And you just bag it, and then you work with it. She'll talk to us about this.
That's very cool.
Well, paper's been made for well over 2,000 years. Chinese were doing it in the 100th century AD. And the Japanese were doing it as well, making rice papers and things. So these things, but now I think it's become apropos. I mean, it's one of those things that people think is kind of cool. So our artist today is Jan Jenkins, and Jan's going to join us here, and we're going to see a little talk to her about her work and her studio and the chaos that she creates for herself. I think we'll call it like that. She also is a printmaker, so we're going to see how she's marrying maybe these two things together. Am I correct, Jan?
You bet. Hi, guys.
Okay,
Hi. Good. Thanks you. Welcome to the show, and I'm looking forward to learning about recycled paper and making paper. So very cool.
Thanks so much. I'm thrilled to be here, and thanks to Paul and Artists in Canada for presenting me with this opportunity. It's great to be part of a group of people where you get to meet other artists all over Canada, and Manitoba's no exception. We've got such a vibrant arts community here. It's like a big family, right? A big tribe that you feel like you've got something in common with. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Can you make mosquitoes into paper? Can you do that?
No, that might be a good possibility, a good way to use up all those big guys that we see down here in Manitoba. So,
yeah, you do grow those big. I know that. And you get some nasty flies up north. Those black flies. Holy smokes.
Yeah. Well, that's why I like a basement studio. Is number one, I don't do well in the heat, and so I can control the environment down here and put on some music and just play, and I'm a bit of a generalist, and thank goodness for the internet, because I've managed to self-teach myself how to make paper by watching online YouTube videos and just kind of see where I could take it. And I know, Paul, that you are into eco-friendly ways of doing things. And so to me, this is a perfect way of using up paper and going out on your walks and collecting different types of grasses and things like that, and then making the paper and seeing what you can do with it after that. So so I only started recently making paper. I'm originally from Montreal, and when I was a kid, I was quite artistic. And then I moved out west to Alberta and worked in the oil and gas industry for 35 years. And then my husband and I, he's originally from Manitoba, we retired out here. And that's when I was able to, and I early retired. I was so lucky at the age of 53 to say, now I get to do what I've always wanted to do, you know? And so I started my artistic journey, and I was very thankful. I didn't take any formal education when it comes to arts. So I was very thankful to the organizations here in Manitoba and locally in Brandon, where I could take weekend art workshops, get mentorship, and that really helped me. So thanks to like Manitoba Art Network and Brandon University and even the Dauphin Art Group up in Dauphin, where I lived for 15 years. I just moved to Brandon recently. So anyway, this art studio that I've got behind me, it's a pure joy because it's twice the space I used to have. And so I can really spread out, and I've managed to do that quite successfully. I don't know about you, but sometimes you get so enthused about, the possibilities of using this or using that you can collect all these things. And then you go, well, I better start doing something with them, right? So.
Yeah, I understand that completely. I could use a couple of quantits for some of the things that I'm working on. So you start accumulating things that are larger and larger all the time, and more and more. And I hate to say I'm not. I try not to be a so-called hoarder, but I do like to have inventory. I'll call it inventory.
Yes, inventory, and
don't have inventory, you can't do anything. You end up being a very minimalist artist, and you have just white space.
Yes,
I'd like to fill the white space up.
My way of limiting my tendencies to acquire and collect possibilities, I would call them, is to limit myself to a container, and if it's full, then it's time to do something with it, and not collect more things, to put in my paper or whatever. So
I tend to have more ideas than I have energy to.
I think we all do.
They take a while to gel in my head as far as where I know there's an idea there. I just don't know just at the moment where I want it to go, but I know I need a number of things because that's the way I do it. Anyway, your work is interesting. What we're gonna do is we're gonna try. Let's get slide one going here. There you go. So we're to sit off to the side here, and we're going to look at your work, and we'll go through your pieces that you sent us some samples. So, but just as part of this introductory is we're going to talk about the paper aspects, what you're doing, the paperwork to start with, and then you're going to see how that fits into your printmaking and how that is marrying. And we'll talk about some of that. I made paper once, I think, in a little workshop, and I understand how it's made, so a little bit, but I've seen videos like you online. And I've got friends that make eco papers and eco printing, just amazing things. And they're really into that aspect of everything down to, squeezing imagery out of plants and things. So I can introduce you to some of that if that becomes an interest. Because you're saying you were collecting plants and seeds and different things to incorporate in your work. So we have something special for you. I can introduce you to
Bonnie. I watched the video, Bonnie, with
There you go. That's the one I'm talking about, Bonnie.
with her beautiful scarves and that. But you'll get me involved in yet another medium where I'll have to collect even more stuff. So I think I'm going to just kind of draw.
It's a powerful skill to be able to say no.
Well,
or maybe. I'm a lot of maybes. I collect stuff. I'm not into the squeezing juice out of plants just yet.
No.
Make silk scarves personally.
Right.
Anyway, we see you sitting here. You're in your hoard. I'll call it hoard of stuff.
So I have a story to tell you. So my adventure with paper making actually started off, and I don't know where I got this book. It's a 1905 book called How to Keep Bees, by a lady, Anna Comstock, out of the United States. And she was an entomologist, an artist, a printmaker, and her husband worked at Cornell University. And I saw this book and it was old, and I thought, oh, I'm going to get this book and I'm going to see what I can do with it. And then roll forward, and I thought, maybe I could use pages for collaging and stuff like that. So it all started with this book.
Show us the book.
Maybe
Stephen can show us a full screen.
There's the book, and an old book. It's got scribbles in it and photographs, and so this is a 1905 edition of Anna's
Well, the
book.
first edition too, and you're cutting it up, right?
I am. I'm terrible, aren't I? But it's going to live on in whatever art I make out of it, or whatever paper I make out of it. So that kind of sat on the back burner, but my love of bees and of plants, and taking photographs top down onto plants and then drawing images based on plants, that's been going on for about 3 years now. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to start making some paper? So as you can see from this photograph, I have hoarded paper, and I got to the point where I had way too much, and I thought, okay, I'm going to sort it by color. I'm going to use my paper shredder. I'm going to shred it up, and then it's ready for using in paper making. So this is what I've got made most recently, or what I've got for using to make paper most recently. I haven't used any of this yet. So I'm waiting until we get back from a camping trip, and then I'm going to start making new paper. But so far I've made 5 batches of paper, and I've kept a log of what all went into each of the papers, because I wanted to make sure that I kind of understood what might work and what might not. But I will show you, for example, some of the this one box, open box on the bottom right of that photograph, that has all my collectibles, all my possibilities to go into the shredded paper making process. And I'll show you, for example, I've collected gum wrappers, for example. And so this is why I limit myself to 1 box, is otherwise it could explode down here. And I'm an organized person. I like to be able to find things. I like my room to be not so visually cluttered. I just staged it for today with all this stuff behind me. So anyway, and for example, old Canadian Tire Bunny, or now this, I'm a tea granny. This is empty tea bags that I have cut up and ready for putting in paper. So we've got all of that, and so for example, speaking of tea bag paper, this was the paper that I actually made from shredded brown papers and tea bags, and I put a few organics in there, some grasses and leaves, and I've got the bag right beside me here. So for example, I've got some fluffy grass seed. This was a challenge to get in the bag. Let me tell you, I kept wanting to fly everywhere, but it's now contained. It's going until I use it. So,
have you got dandelion fuzz too in there?
Not yet.
Because
But
that is a beautiful fiber, I would think, to work with would be the dandelion fluff, because it's already got the little entrail, but it's got a little seed on the end of each one of them.
Yes.
You'll have to get another bag.
I'm going to have to. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So
we have a lot of this poplar fuzz that comes everywhere too, seasonally.
everywhere, yeah.
Makes my eyes and my nose run, but it's already like a cotton fiber. It's ready to go, I think.
Yes, my husband has the same allergies, but yeah, that's great. I'm going to put that on the list of things to collect. So
I got ideas. So you can put all kinds of stuff. You're going to have more bags by the end of this show.
Well, that box can only get so much more full, and then we're done, right? So I'll have to be very selective in what I put in there. So from having shredded paper, from there, you actually have to soak the paper and you have to blend it. And so once you've blended it, you put it in a vat of water, and you can add in different organics or pieces of paper. And you can see in this photograph, actually, some of the beige papers are actually torn up pages from this bee book. And I've also, in that paper, I've also included some hops cone petals. Our former neighbors, when we lived in Dauphin, they had hops vines. And so they're really good gardeners. So they gave me permission to go around and scrounge, and I included some hops cones in there, and I'm going to just.
So what is the base? So what is the base pulp in the paper that you're making right now? So you've got a paper there with little things floating on them, which are some of the selective pieces that you've added, the organics that you've added to it. But what the green little? What is the base? Is that just
that's the pulp that I blended from shredded paper that came into our house, flyers, envelopes. I did learn that you do have to take the plastic window out of the envelopes. That doesn't work too well. Empty newsprint from shipping container, things that you got shipped to yourself in your house. Anything like that. Old telephone book pages. So it's pulp. So when you blend it in the blender, you're chopping up the shredded paper so that it actually becomes like a mush.
Yeah.
And
you use a food blender is what you basically use, right?
I do, yes. I use a food blender. And you have to make sure that your paper is well soaked and that any of the thicker, stiffer papers are torn up really, really well so that they don't stress your blender out. And it's nice to leave a little bit of the pulp to have a bit of texture in it. So you don't want it to be blended smooth completely. You do want to have some bits that are a little bit bigger, and they add some nice flex into your as well. So you can see from this one. The other thing I did, Paul, was I had some leftover acrylic inks in spray bottles, and the spray bottles got clogged. So I threw the inks into the vat of water, and so I could soak the spray bottles in alcohol to clear them. And so some of the paper that I made ended up getting a green tinge or a yellow tinge to it, based on these inks or the colors of the papers that I put in them. So this, for example, is like a yellow paper, and you can see yellow flecks. This actually has clover seed in it, and the clover seed decided that it wanted to sprout before the paper had dried. So we have some interesting textures in there from sort of sprouted seeds, and again, some pieces of the bee book page and whatnot. So it's really fun. And each time I make a batch of paper, I would say that I end up having about 25 sheets of paper. you go through the process of dipping a screen that has a frame on top of it. So it's called a mold and decal. And you dip it into the water and you slish it around. And then you let it drain. And then you lay it out onto pieces of cloth. They're called couches, pieces of cloth. And then once that's dried enough, then you can hang those up to dry further, which you can see in this photograph. And then from there, once it's dried completely, and I just used a laundry stand, and it's actually the same laundry stand that I used to let my printmaking prints dry. So it's a multi-purpose stand as far as I'm concerned. And so from there, then you want the paper to flatten out. And there's various ways of doing printmaking, paper making. Some people actually press the paper while it's wet, and some people wait till it's dry and then they press the paper. So it depends on what kind of equipment you've got. And for me, I have a friend who's a retired beekeeper, and he's the one who made this beautiful paper press for me. And so he made the paper press, and you stick your paper in there once it's dried, and then you compress it, and you can leave it in there for however long you want. And then you end up with a flat piece of paper that you can either make cards with, or you can draw on, or in this case, I actually ran this through the press, my roller press, my printmaking press, with a lino cut design that had not been inked. So you get a little bit of embossing. It's hard to see it in this one. But again, I also added in some of the bee book pages by cutting out shapes of bees right there. So, yeah.
So what kind of weight is the paper? Is it about 200 pound or 300 pound?
That's what I'm experimenting with. The thinner the paper, the harder it is to get it released off the screen. I like to use a really fine screen. So I'm actually using a screen printing screen, that really fine nylon mesh. And so the thinner the paper, the harder it is to get it to release. So I'm playing with that. I'm experimenting with that. And I'd say some of the papers are more like rising Stonehenge thickness.
So that's a kind of a little bit of a smoother surface on it.
Yeah, it does definitely have a smoother surface on the side that was on the screen.
Yeah.
And so that's my preference, especially for printmaking or for doing other types of art on top of it. And like I said, I've only made 5 batches, so it's a work in progress. And that's the thing. All of this creativity, if I want to just sidetrack here, it's all about the journey. It's the joy of the journey of creating and discovering and learning and pushing yourself to try new things, despite the fact that you're anxious that, oh, what if I fail? What if it's an experiment that's a waste of time? And that's the lovely thing about, I guess, being retired, is I don't have to worry about a successful outcome or a sellable product, even though I do sell things on consignment, and I have played around with wearable art as well. And the other thing, Paul, you were talking about was closets and storage. And I do not have that space. So I focus on artwork for smaller spaces. So my artwork, the maximum size I make is about 16 by 20. My preference is smaller. I love to work really small and intimate on my pieces when I do pen and inks. I'm a bit of a generalist, so I do acrylic painting, pen and inks. Zen doodling is one of my favorite things, and I'll show you that after we finish doing the paper making. So anyway, the paper is dry, then we press it, and then it's ready for use. And that's when we get into the lino cut. So for
we just go to back up with an idea here, just saying, not saying your lino cuts couldn't work as well, but when you said that you use some seeds in the paper and sometimes they try to sprout while you're trying to wait for your paper to dry. But I remember years ago seeing a person who made gift cards to people, and they would put poppy seeds in them and different things.
Yes.
So the card became environmental. You could bury your card after you tear off the back, maybe keep the front, whatever, but wherever those seeds are that are in there, you plant those seeds in your garden. So it becomes part of a concept for, spreading not only back to nature, because it all definitely goes back to the earth, but now those little seeds are embedded in that. And it's a really nice little keepsake. You water them and your, say, poppies or different flowers or different things come up. So it's a great idea for someone trying to think of a unique gift card that because you know what, they end up in the garbage. I mean, after a while, you can only keep the most beautiful thing for just so long. Either frame it, you cut the card up and frame it, or it's because you've made an original card. Each one is different and unique. But if you put, for instance, seeds in it or something, somebody else can get another segment out of that card and say, I can put that in my garden, and there's a nice keepsake. So it's another reason for getting a new card every year. It's a great come on for people to understand about your processes, and it also is a great it's a great badge on your arm to say that you're doing what you can do and spread the love, I guess is what we'll call it. Anyway, I wanted to mention that because once you mentioned the little seeds and they start to try to grow, I guess you could put a little bit of vinegar in the water or something that might slow them up a little bit of wanting to do anything. But you need to make the water not so friendly for them. It'll hold them off for a little while, I think.
It's a bit of a balance between making sure you've added some ingredients to the water so that your paper won't go moldy during the drying process, and that because you're using organics in there, you want to make sure that you don't end up with some undesirable things happening in your paper while it's drying, while you're using
chemistry.
So I do put a few things in the paper, and I did question whether or not the seeds would actually grow if they've already started to germinate when I was making the paper. So I thought I'm going to save that experiment for another time, and focus on, and I have to tell you, the other thing is, even though I'm using a book by a gal who was an entomologist, a lover of six-legged insects to incorporate into my theme for this project of bees, I'm actually not a bug lover. Like spiders and different types of bugs that can infest your home, I don't like that. So any of the organics I've brought into the house, I've actually slow baked in the oven to make sure that no insect eggs would hatch. Okay. Because I've lived in a house before where there has been, for example, an earwig infestation, and I'm just very, very cautious about bringing
stuff. They got a unique shape, and they squish really nice under your press.
Oh my goodness, no. So I'm very cautious about what comes into the house, and I treat it that I don't end up with any unpleasant surprises, right?
So I was just thinking, if you could take a wet paper and you take it up to a large cobweb that's in a window and you press it against that, and now the cobweb is in your paper. You could do all kinds of lovely things.
Paul, it sounds like you need to get into paper making. You sound like you have all these wonderful.
I have lots of ideas. I just so if I was there, I would have a riot with this stuff.
Oh, well,
I have too many things started already.
Well, maybe it's time to come visit Brandon, and you could I could set up the workshop and we could play at paper making. Why not?
Paper. Yeah, I got to drive 10 hours so I can do that.
Yeah. Well, you could make it a holiday. We've got a lovely
holiday. Yes.
Yeah.
If there's a quilt shop, my wife will be there, so we'll be no
There
problem.
is.
I know there is. He knows there is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, we got
Lino cut and watercolors. Yeah. So I was thinking, well, what do I do with this paper? And of course, I've been working on this project with a collective I belong to called the Drawn Together Collective, and it's a group of 10 ladies, and we've been working on this project called Stimulus Response, where we each read a book by a prairie female author, and then that was our stimulus. And then our response was to do a creative series of body of work that was inspired or stimulated by either the thoughts or the visuals that the book portrayed. So mine had to do with edible, herbal, and medicinal Manitoba plants and keeping bees. So that's what my artwork ended up being about, based on the book that I was reading. And the book was called Swarm by Lauren Carter. And it had to do with some people having to escape a decaying urban environment and trying to live off the land on their own. So I'll just leave it at that. But it was an interesting read. So what I've done is, I've used just commercial flooring. So this is commercial flooring that I use here. And I actually draw on, I started with the honeycomb and the bees. And then I'm going to freehand on top of this lino cut a design that includes forageable Manitoba plants. They're not necessarily native, but they're either edible, herbal, or medicinal. And so here you can see I'm carving the design and it's a very meditative thing. I talk about loving to do Zen doodling, and this is Zen doodling. Zen doodling is very meditative. And so I find the drawing onto the lino and the carving very, very meditative. And the secret is to make sure your tools stay sharp, and you're always cutting away from your hands, and that you have some Band-Aids handy just in case, because I've only cut myself once in the time I've done this, and it was good enough cut to remind me to always cut away from myself, right?
Yeah, safety first. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess I've worked on reduction wood blocks and lino a little bit before, but it's always remembering that there's like watercolor. There's no backing up once you've removed a piece.
Exactly.
But I did always kind of like, there's a whole bunch of different printmaking techniques that you can use to embellish, I guess, make it look like you have more color and more diversity in your work before you start cutting on your lino. Because once you've cut your lino down to the very last cut, it basically is a line drawing, and there's not much left. You've removed all the other areas that received ink.
Right.
Yeah.
So some people love doing reduction lino cut. I don't, because I like my plate is a baby I gave birth to. It's a child that I've nurtured into existence, and I don't want to cut it up. So I actually prefer doing either hand coloring or jigsaw lino cut, where you take your lino and you chop it into manageable pieces where you can ink each section, but then you can tape it back together, or multi plates. And so I've done one series that was multi plates, but I really like the hand coloring and talking about Japanese paper. I love using Hosho paper to do the hand coloring. It gives such a beautiful crisp print. And then the watercolors just work so well with the Hosho paper. So I think as an artist, part of our challenge is finding those materials and supplies that that work well with us. And you know, as soon as you switch up the paper, it's like you have to learn all over again, right? And
It either receives or repels one way or the other. And
yeah, or
once you find success, stay with that for a while. But it doesn't.
exactly. Even brushes, I mean, even carving tools. I mean, once you find the ones that you work really well with, it pays to stick with those and just really perfect your craft, you know, with those. So it's like my husband, he's an archer and he loves bows. But every time he picks up a different bow, it's like he's got to start all over again, right? To get the feel of it and how the bow and the arrow work towards hitting the target. So I think we're kind of the same.
You can find all kinds of analogies for that.
Yeah.
Sure. My great carving tool that I received this last while is a hot knife.
Ooh.
Which is for cutting styrofoam. And I'm actually just working on a piece right now. So it's kind of, it's the same thing as when you cut it, it's gone.
Yeah. Now you're using the hot knife for, what are you cutting into?
Styrofoam.
And you're using the styrofoam for?
I make little vignettes for, I'll just grab one here to show you.
Sure. Yeah, it's because styrofoam is fun to do as a printmaking tool as well.
Well, let's see whether it shows up or not.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, so you can see.
You've got, yeah.
So this is my Canada one. So hopefully it's done at the end of the day today.
Very cool. I can't wait to see what you do with that.
Yeah. So it's that's what I do. And if anybody wants to know.
See, now here's my idea. You could lay a piece of wet paper into that and you would end up with an embossed piece of paper.
You would, yes. And this is what a hot knife looks like.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's and it has an attachment for depth as well, but you can use, it just plugs in and you just click the little button and
away you go.
So it sounds easy, but it takes a little bit of work to get it. It's like working with a really awkward, big, long brush.
Yes, yeah.
And the weight is off balance too, so you gotta kind of learn how to use it. Anyway, let's go back to what you're doing here. So we all have different tools. So for like, and this is sort of a version of printmaking. But you're right. You could lay the paper, wet paper, into cut styrofoam, and it would take on a form. Then you pop it out and you've got a relief, like a relief print, let it dry, and you could frame it like it's in it. Yeah, it's beautiful. Lots of different like printmaking techniques. It'd be great to have another show just on different types of printmaking. And we are planning some things later this fall. So we'll be looking at maybe a number of different guests that will help us with that process. So that'll be kind of fun.
Yeah, and this is where collaboration, I love collaboration with other artists, right? Like one of the things I collaborated with was musician, Winnipeg musician Rain Hamilton. And this was through Manitoba Art Network and through MAWA, Mentoring Artists for Women's Art. And we did, I took a piece of her music and I used it for inspiration. She took one of my artworks and used it for inspiration. And we each she created a song and I created a piece of art. And so I love those kinds of collaborations. So, you know, I'd be interested to see you taking that styrofoam and maybe collaborating with a local paper maker and see what you can do. Yeah.
Good luck finding local people. There'll be some other artists for sure. Local people. Yeah. Paper production in itself is very limited. There's not very much being done. Even commercially, a lot of the papers have been cut back. COVID has really hurt the industry a lot. Papers have become extremely expensive. So I think what we as artists are doing is we're taking those existing papers and grinding them up and making our own product from them. It's creating a new art form. I won't say a brand new art form, but it is incorporating our art into that form. So I'm liking that. So this is one of your linos that you were working on?
Right. And I'm a multidisciplinary. So I don't become an expert at anything, but I like seeing how I can marry mediums together. So here's the lino cut, and I'm carving it. And what you do with a lino plate is you stain it first. In this case, I stained it with a wash of acrylic inks so that it ended up being pink. And that way, when I'm carving, I can actually see where I've carved, and where it's black is where I've left the lino alone. And so the black parts, when I ink the plate, the black parts will be the part that receive the ink to print onto my paper.
So
And
do you use water-based inks or oil-based inks?
I really love the oil-based graphic chemical ink, but I did buy Caligo Safe Wash ink, so it's oil-based, but it's water-soluble. You just have to be careful how you use that ink. Some traditional printmaking processes include pre-dampening your paper, and that works with oil-based inks, but with the water-based, water-soluble inks that are oil-based, you end up with the bloom because the paper's too wet. So
you don't get a sharp, you don't get a sharp edge.
And I learned the hard way with handmade paper, it's not, it's too fragile to dampen the paper. So I had to make sure I inked the plates really well with multiple thin coats of ink. If you go too thick, it'll get in all the grooves. And so multiple thin coats of the ink, and then run it through the press at, and of course, running it through the roller press, you have to figure out what pressure you're going to use, because if you use not enough pressure, you end up with the ink not transferring properly. If you use too much pressure, the ink gets into all the fine details. So for example, here's one that here's one of the prints I made on the handmade paper, and you can see some flecks of metallic in there. You can see flecks from, this is actually the clover seed paper, and I also included some petals in there as well. So it's interesting to see how you can take a blank piece of paper like this one, and you can end up having a beautiful image on it. Yeah, it's like I said, it's like you're giving birth to children. So it's just wonderful, except for you don't have 18 years that you have to look after them, right? So.
And it doesn't end at 18 years, by the way.
No, I don't think so. I personally don't have children, so
it's a lifetime commitment, let me tell you.
it would be, yeah.
But no, and the other thing is with printmaking, a lot of times, like I think you worked with monoprinting at all, it's a great system where you can mask things and you can create offsetting and different things. So you can use your existing linos that you've done, and then use masking to mask out areas that you can put other color back into. So when you're pulling your proofs, so there's lots of different.
Yeah, or the same big one that I showed you, I masked off a window, and this is just part of it. So I made a smaller print from masking off, and so
yeah, no, it's a great way to I guess where you're trying to become a little bit of a mass production, just you're trying to get some of your dollar value back out of what you're doing, because time is money, and you do have to be able to afford to do what you're doing a little bit. But a lot of people can't afford to buy, say, a large print, but you know what, they might buy one or two smaller ones and then move up into collecting something later on. So you're always thinking of a couple of price points probably when doing things. And I think being aware that your audience, maybe they've already got a number of your pieces, but they have room for one small piece. So you're always thinking of that and trying to keep them involved on a regular basis as to what you're doing. I mean, we've talked about that on our show off and on about, creating your markets and giving them excitement and sharing that excitement that you have with them. That's what they're buying. They're buying the excitement that you have in your work, and they want to be a part of that excitement that you have. So
Exactly.
if you don't show that you have energy and excitement in your, they don't want your work. It doesn't show up in your work. Your work looks boring and they don't want to be a part of it. But when you look like you're doing something in a positive manner, they really embrace that.
The other thing that because I'm not what I would call a traditional printmaker, I like to do what I call varied edition runs. So no two prints are the same. And if I do print off on Hosho paper, 3 copies of a black inked image onto a piece of paper, I'll hand color one, or I might print onto pre-colored paper. So I like switching it up. And so I try to limit the runs so that I've got no more than about 35 that I've done, but every one of them is different, right? So for example, just get this. So for example, this one, you can see that I've done it on pre-colored paper. So even though I've got 20 of these printed off, they're all different. Some of them I've hand colored, and here's another one that's been done on pre-colored. Whoops, I'm trying to get it so the light's not there. Pre-colored paper, And then you were talking about doing things with your art. Well, this one, for example, it's a lino cut, but this one is a repeating pattern. If you laid 9 of these together side by side, up and down, the pattern would repeat. And let me show you what I did with that in a different color. I've done tote bags. Whoops, I have to come over here. I've done tote bags in the repeating pattern. I've done scarves in the repeating pattern, So, So I'm enthusiastic about my stuff. Now, the hardest part being an artist and being enthusiastic about your work is the fact that now you have to spend time promoting yourself. You have to spend time getting yourself out there. And I think that's the challenge, because most of us, we love our studio time. We love the journey of creating. So it's getting to the point where, okay, now I've got to put myself out there. I have to market myself. And that can be daunting for artists, right?
Yeah, it's daunting a lot of times, the marketing, and it sounds like it's a boring part of the work, but it doesn't have to be boring.
No.
This conversation we're having today, it's just a sincere conversation about your work. And I think people like to see that, and that's how they become involved in what you do. I mean, you're a person like they are. I mean, you're not set up on a pedestal. You're an artist, and like they are a seamstress or there's something else, right? It doesn't, you can respect them for their skill set and what, discipline they've chosen to follow. But I think, no, this is, you also do a few lectures, it looks like, and you had a few shows. And
so this was the body of work that I created using handmade paper and using hand coloring Hosho paper. And this was part of my overall body of work for that response to the book I had read. And this was our group show. The 10 women artists had over 160 pieces of artwork that were throughout the main gallery of the Art Gallery of Southwest Manitoba in Brandon. The show just got taken down last week. And so it was up for 2 months, and now we're moving to Winnipeg with the show. So I love being part of groups such as Drawn Together Collective. I'm a member of the Arts West Council and another group called Artist Hearts Friends. And it's lovely connecting with other artists. And when you collaborate or when you do group projects, it's like everything takes on this power that and a lot more joy and fun. than doing it on your own, right? And so our stimulus response show is actually traveling to Winnipeg, and it's going to be in a major gallery in Winnipeg later on this year as well.
Well, that's great. No?
Yeah. And then I do print on demand wearable art product. You know, like for example, I'm wearing one of my t-shirts from doing jelly plate printmaking. And this is one of my shirts from Zen Doodle I did. As you can see, plants and flowers and things like that.
Yep.
And so, and I do cups and mugs. And one of the things I love to do is support charity. So I will donate some of my items for local charity fundraising and Wildlife SOS. I love elephants. So Wildlife SOS in India and you know, places like that. So I feel like it's my way of trying to help make a bit of a difference. So
yeah,
yeah,
that's we've had a great I guess we'll call it a visit, because you know, we could talk for hours about work and art, and we squeezed a great hour, almost an hour out of you here. That's 50 minutes.
But before we go, Jim, because people are
Here we
going to ask
go,
this.
here we go.
Yeah, I know. Paul already knows the question. So what is your artwork or your prints or your mugs or your scarves go for? Like, what's a starting price, an ending price? Like, someone sees this and go, I have to collect Jan. We're going to put your website and everything below. They can reach out to you. They can reach out to us or Artists in Canada. People will find you. So what's the price range of your work?
So, for example, the mugs go for $22.
Okay. Is that Canadian?
Canadian. I do sell
$4 US. Okay. No, so
I do sell on consignment in a couple of places locally here.
Right.
And but for example, a limited edition reproduction print. So this I have an archival printer. These go for $35. Some of my larger artworks that are like 11 by 15, those will be close to $400. But a lot of my prints, like a print like this one, it's usually backed on a back mat, and it comes with a certificate of authenticity, and it's nicely packaged. It'll be $60, for example. Okay. And I do have a website that I have to tell you, I switched websites and I have to populate it, and I've been working with a digital mentor. So it's in the beginning stages. So, but I'm thrilled with it. Because a lot of artists' websites, it's for original art. And of course, when you have multiple prints or you sell art cards, for example, you can see in back of me there, I've got a rack of art cards. A lot of websites aren't set up for multiple purchases. So, yeah.
Well, your stuff is very cool. I like the scarves and the shirts. So with Jan's email and Jan's website address will be down below here, everybody. And if you want something and you can't find Jan, reach out to us here at Two Old Farts, or reach out to Paul at Artists in Canada, and we will get you in touch with Jan. So,
well, thanks so much, Stephen and Paul. I really enjoyed the session, and looking forward to watching a few of your videos. I've watched a couple of the ones that you and Paul have hosted, and I see you've got other videos, Two Old Farts. And
we've got about 15 different shows on the network, so there's something for everybody.
Oh,
if you go to the playlist, this is for everybody. If you go to the playlist and you hit playlist, you'll find all our shows. Just click all, and they're all there.
Looks like you're having fun.
We're having something.
Every day.
Jan, it was a pleasure. Paul, as always, thank you so much. Jan, stick around. We'll be with you. We're going to run the ending credits. This is David's job, but I have to do it today. Don't forget, everybody, to subscribe and like. Thank you so much for joining us today. Cheers.
Thank you.